Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us in this class about C.L.I.L and its future projection. Let me introduce our expert, Willy Cano. Willy, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Let me just tell you some details about Willy. Willy is a C.L.I.L trainer and teacher trainer in the Communidad de Madrid. Okay, she has been in the Bilingual Program of the Community of Madrid since the very beginning. She has been preparing teachers and language assistants. She has developed the C.L.I.L approach as a coordinator in school Daniel Martín in Madrid. She's an advisor for several school associations, improving C.L.I.L development in schools. He's coordinating C.L.I.L materials for publishing house too. And she's also collaborating with UNIR in the development of C.L.I.L programs. And she has written our C.L.I.L handbook for Spanish bilingual schools. So, Willy, let's start. Okay, just the first questions. Is there a difference between bilingualism and C.L.I.L?
Well, I think it's a matter of maturation in terms of applying additional languages. For most of the people, bilingual education and C.L.I.L are very joined, and especially probably it can be exactly the same when it isn't. It happened here in Madrid when we started working on it. And it's because we understood that bilingual education means I teach the subject in two languages, because there were myths to be killed. Especially these kind of myths come from the idea of that bilingual education is not going to promote development in the L1. Once these walls are broken is when C.L.I.L gets a new perception, and now we can proudly say that bilingual education has like lots of definitions, whereas C.L.I.L has a unique one. It's a unique one that is growing, right? We will define later, if you don't mind, what C.L.I.L is. But is bilingual education, depending on where we are, is defined or is considered in different ways. If we take a look at, for example, Latin American areas, in Latin America, most of the people consider that bilingual education and C.L.I.L is exactly the same. And it's because probably C.L.I.L is not well defined. Whereas in Europe, due to the fact that C.L.I.L was invented here or created here and is much more developed through the Linguistic Application Center that is in Graz, C.L.I.L is, let's say, being more concrete year by year. So now we know that bilingual education has a lot of definitions, and some of them are not C.L.I.L, and C.L.I.L is pretty clear on the goals that have to be achieved.
So has C.L.I.L adopted a new definition from the one given in 1996?
Yeah, well, taking into consideration the first question, some people understand that bilingual education is teaching a subject in English. And probably they can say that because the first definition that was given in 1996 was not concrete enough. C.L.I.L was defined as, let's say, as an umbrella term that embraces all good teaching practices. The problem is that good teaching practices weren't defined. Now, after several years, now we know that these good teaching practices have been defined. It's like if you were in a video game and you are selecting what is good and what is bad. And what is good means it's good now, and we will check in the future if this is good is still here, or it has to be let's say deleted and come into the non-good teaching practices. So from my point of view, and especially now here in Europe, and for mature autonomous communities like, for example, Madrid, in which bilingual education, due to the policies and the way it was established, it's much more mature. We are talking about more than 10 years of experience. We can say that C.L.I.L is a new reconceptualization of the curriculum, which implies, as it is a change, non-resistance. It implies, like a positive attitude towards a new reconceptualization of the curriculum and a sequence of activities, because it's not, like content by content. Content is secondary. What is, more interesting in C.L.I.L is the different steps that we take in the classroom. So now we can say, that is a new reconceptualization of the curriculum that implies a sequence of activities that promote, by the end, lifelong learning. If we are not able to speak about, in an additional language, about, what it was explained through different, activities, the topic of objective topic, we didn't reach the goals. So C.L.I.L now is this sequence of activities much more than the content.
Okay, you were talking about Graz and Europe. How did C.L.I.L start in Europe, and right now, what is a good example of C.L.I.L in Europe?
Well, to be honest with you, a perfect a perfect, model doesn't exist. All depends on the context. And if we take a look at, for example, Spain, the context in Andalusia does nothing to do with the context in, for example, communities like Catalonia or Basque Country, Whereas, not only they've got, much more experience in terms of how to deal with additional languages or co-official languages, but also, the feeling, the perception, the way we receive, the additional language. If you were taught in a context where there are several languages, you are much more closer to another language. And not only that, the strategies that you use to learn, your second language will help you a lot to acquire, the third language, or even a fourth or a fifth, any language that comes out. So a good model for me, one of the best models that we can copy is Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, they are playing with 3 languages, and what they are implementing from the very beginning, it's a big exposure to the language that is opposite to the context. So if, for example, people speak Luxembourg and they are very close to German, the language that will be, applied at the very beginning, especially in infancy education, will be French. It's totally the one that is not connected to your context. So the earlier you start, learning an additional language, the better you will be able to apply it into any educational system. This is something that it has been done, for example, in the Basque Country. There are some schools in which, they are learning, like Castilian, they are learning, Euskera, and they are learning, English. And I still remember, when I was visiting Vitoria-Gasteiz, and I had to say, that I've seen many schools teaching Euskera in infant education, 100% Euskera. So it makes, like a big difference once the students come into primary education. Another example that I can give is the school in which we were working, a lot, developing, bilingual education into C.L.I.L. When we came into the school, it was one of the 26 first schools, here in the Community of Madrid that were going to be, bilingual. We had 20 nationalities, and rather than being, a difficulty, it was, something, that was helping us a lot, especially because most of our students were learning Spanish as a second language. So English is the third language. Most of the strategies that they were applying to learn Spanish were used to learn, English. And they were boosting the other students, especially the Spaniards, which who were only able to speak one language to get more, right? So we took, a lot of advantage of these, different strategies that people can get when they're in a different context. So for me, Madrid is a bullseye here in Europe. It's not only for me, it's for the majority of the European Commission. They consider Madrid in terms of organization and in terms of how after 10 years, well, more than 10 years, but after 10 years we were able to say, proudly that there are schools in which C.L.I.L is well applied. Of course, there is still a lot to do, most of the difficulties are especially, with the teachers, because by the end we get to understand that we are in a process of education, and no matter if it's mathematics or if it is, natural science in English, the key of success is the teacher. And it's something also something important to be mentioned is that an isolated teacher is what we call the snipers, can be in charge of a single classroom, but when the group of teachers are converted into a team of teachers, and instead of being, giving solutions to special classes, you give solutions for the whole school, is where you are applying, you are acquiring, educational project, a bilingual educational project. Once you've got that, you can get much more. And it implies, coordination. It implies, the necessity of every single member of the educational society, especially teachers, to be able to discuss, if they are in a good shape, if they are in the good direction, and to discuss, with their mates, co-workers, and build, a bigger staff. And especially never stop recycling. We need to recycle each other every single term, every single year. And in this process of recycling, we have to also involve students. We don't usually ask students about what they think about the teaching process, but they are the ones who, by the end, absorb, our teaching practices. So if all of us can give opinions, positive opinions, in order to build, a bigger project for the school, I think, everything is done. I'm not talking only about bilingual education. I'm talking about any kind of educational change.
Okay, before our next question, just a reminder to the audience that if they have any questions for our expert, they can write it on the chat, and at the end, we will try to answer all of them. Okay, so we have been talking about Spain, Europe, Spain, Madrid, the Basque Country. Let's go to the teacher's point of view. We have been already talking about that. How is CLIL applied in the classroom directly?
Well, through these years, we had the opportunity to visit lots of autonomous communities, especially here in Spain, right? Of course, we went outside, and I had to say that in Spain, the way it is applied from what the theory is saying and through the experience that we get, and not only in this school in which we were practicing CLIL, but also in other schools in which, we have CLIL totally applied, we can say, that there are big differences. And the latest, educational system didn't help that, because every single autonomous community acquired different or make or created, a different curriculum. So now the differences are much bigger in terms of curriculum, and teachers really feel, pressed about curriculum. Whereas we should be, I was going to say must, yeah, but we should be, very pressed about the way we teach, not about what we are teaching, because the systems we apply in the classroom to make students acquire, learn, contents and apply them competentially talking is what it can make a big difference between, what from, a formal point of view curriculum is and what the curriculum is for. I always make these questions to myself when I see, any kind of blocks of contents is what is it for? And if we are able to know, what is it for, then we will be able to teach students for a reason, right? I can say that, coming back, to the question is that Community of Madrid, from my point of view, really works nicely. Valencia is looking for a solution, and of course, I hope, promptly they will find a solution of working with the 3 languages, and especially with the areas in which, the co-official language is not spoken or is spoken. And then, especially I really would like to highlight, Andalusian, case, which is a case in which, it's difficult because of the organization to come, with a proper, project. I'm not saying that schools are not able, is that the situation doesn't allow the school, to run by themselves. So one day you are bilingual and the next year, you lose, your teacher. So bilingual education is drop off, it's like, I think it's difficult to run any kind of project, right? But in any case, I think, there is still a lot of things to do. I think, we have to share, our opinions and our, good teaching practices among all the communities. And I can say that is for a common profit. And I have to say, that there are some schools in Andalusia where I can see, big changes. And as we, mentioned, and as we did, for example, in Canary Islands or in Navarra, what we are doing is really, working with the specific schools that can be, mirror schools of reference. So students or teachers, when I say students, it's students from, for example, teaching degree or other teachers, people who are, in action at the trenches, can go there and see how teaching is, and what is the point, what is the big difference that exists, in between, the way they are working and the way, other people are working. So I come back, to the idea of the net, if we can share not only in a school, but with other schools, no matter what they are, because I cannot compare, a school here in Madrid to a school, for example, in Basque Country, where English is the 3rd language or the 2nd additional language. I think it is good if I go there, I see how they work, and of course, I know we will be able to get something positive from that. Of course, we gotta change, we gotta vary, we gotta adapt, every single stuff that we see into our context. But I think, improvements are there, and we have to look for them. They are not gonna come for us, because this is one of the challenges that we got now in CLIL. There is a big lack of research.
Okay, we have been talking about the origin of CLIL, in Europe, in Spain, in the class. Now what is the future of CLIL?
Right, good question. Well, first of all, we have to change from bilingual education into CLIL. And the key of CLIL is in the I. If there is no integration of the language and the content, you are not opening the first door towards C.L.I.L. Of course, when you are teaching an additional language, you need content. But the content can be, like, let's say, more focused on vocabulary than something useful for kids, right? In natural and social science is where we can find, much more context or contents, big contents, for kids. So we can take advantage of them and grow with them. So if we think about, bilingual school, if English is still totally isolated from natural or social science, this is not C.L.I.L. This is still bilingual education, right? When English subject is totally integrated with natural science and is supporting not only the context but also the English students require to be able to explain what they are learning in a non-linguistic subject, like for example natural science, this is the first step, because you broke the idea of different parts of contents, right? If English is a part and natural science is another part, you are still committing an error. I mean, let's say, well, it's not an error, it's something to be improved, it's a challenge, right? Once you convert, English and natural science into a single part of knowledge is when students are able to understand, to have a different perception of what the different subjects are, So when they are talking, for example, about animals, they don't know if they are talking, if this is, the English classroom or if this is, the natural science classrooms. This is animals. I'm learning about animals and I have let's say, like a goal. So by the end, I will be able to reach that goal, and I'm going to fight for that goal. This is also something, that we have to improve in schools. With this, what we are doing is breaking the idea of passive learning and starting, active learning. Active learning is the way to, let's say, print in our kids nowadays any kind of knowledge, no matter if it's the language or non-linguistic contents, right? So this is, let's say, like the present in most of the schools right now, fighting to join subjects. So with this, what you have done is, in terms of quantity, you extended the time. If, for example, here we talk about Madrid, if there are, 5 sessions of English and 2 sessions and a half, let's count, 3 sessions of natural science. Once you break the idea of different, parts of knowledge, now you've got 8 sessions a week in which students they don't really need to know what the subject is, right? Next step is when you break what they are called the units. Instead of having, units that last between 2-3 weeks, so you are playing with the kids, which can, linguistically talking, do more. The problem is that the content will be in the brain of the kids. For the smart ones, let's say for the ones who can do a lot, in a very short period of time, this content will be just for a short period of time because it has been acquired in only 2-3 weeks. Whereas if we extend it into what we call projects, term projects, not only these kind of students will be able to remember that, but also, next year, if there is any question or if it's required, any knowledge from that content, the student will have a lot of, let's say, ways of connecting to this content when it was, taught previously. But also, students with difficulties and students who are not, so much, who are not able to give, so much in the first 2 weeks, they will be able to give more than they expected. And this way, when we are working in term projects, and this is more or less close to the idea of project-based learning, is when students can not only see, that English is useful, that the content is useful, but also I can apply the content. It's not I get all the information in my brain and then I release it, whatever, and then I go into the next topic. No, I use it, I apply it, so it's active learning, it demands my movement, it demands my looking for information. So there are many ways of connecting to this knowledge. Students will be able to do much more. So instead of these eight sessions a week, talking about this context, if you multiply this by as many weeks as 3 months as 3 months have, look at the big amount of time of exposure to the language. And in terms of quality, if we make that sequence of activities that we were saying when we were defining CLIL, students will be able to have, gradually, learning or acquiring, linguistic level as well as, cognitive level. What it cannot happen, and it's happening nowadays if CLIL is not applied, sometimes we are requiring from students to give us, a high cognitive level when the linguistic level is pretty low. That cannot work. So language has to grow and cognitive has to be demanding by little. So if we make a language scaffolding and a cognitive graduation of different, operational skills, students will be able to grow not only, linguistically talking, but cognitively talking. If you think about you learning, your own language as a kid, your own mother tongue, you will be able to see that, that there is first a lot of, experience and a lot of input. If we don't enrich the input in quality and in quantity, students won't be able to give us, output. So it's basic. Let's say there are lots of basic principles, but as you can see, we have to combine them as if they were, jigsaws in order to build, this puzzle. And the next step, from my point of view, is to give, not only to acquire through term projects, or project-based learning, the knowledge, which can stop, at the end of the term, is that I want students to apply it directly into the society. And this is a demand because, values are there, if we are contributing to the society through project-based learning, not only students will be able to see that the content is much more useful, but also that I did something. Because we want people to change stuff. We need people to do things. We need to break the idea of being passive. We need students to be active. And in order to do it, what we are doing in some schools is applying, service learning, or as it is said, in the US, community engagement. We do want students that by the end of the learning process, during these 3 months, project-based learning, we want them to do something in society. So if, for example, I'm teaching animals, I want students to go and to see, what an adoption of animals is, to take care of these animals, to let's make, the society aware of the big amount of animals, for example, that are abandoned, and to make them, conscious that this can be changed and it's in our hands, any change. Like that, as a society, we can grow much more. And then, like talking even a little bit more about future, it's my will, is to convert this into something, much more difficult for teachers. So I do think, we should take, step by step. Once teacher will be able to do this the latest, let's say, school idea, that I explained, one step forward will be, to be focused on phenomenon-based learning. This is a project that is being worked right now in Europe. One of the mentors is David Marsh, and is being applied in Finland and in other countries. And to be honest with you, I like it because, we don't consider the curriculum as something that has to be taught as it is, for example, in Spain, It's, from my point of view, it's ridiculous, and I gotta be 100% honest, to have, content, specific content for first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, by grades, it's not this. Let me play with the grades. Let me give, let me make, the curriculum significant for kids, right? So one twist, and probably, 180 degrees, will be, to start, understanding the curriculum as jigsaws. So I evaluate the society with my kids. I see the necessities of my society or my location, and we are going to implement something. And through that, we will be able to learn a lot. So imagine that we got problems, with, let's say, the rubbish in your village. I do want students to evaluate, what is this, to make, an analysis. And with the analysis, start creating a project to sort this out. How can it be? Look at that. They are learning about the different kinds of rubbish that we got, how it is, like recycle or reuse or nothing happens. So evaluate the process from throwing the rubbish into the bin till, you know, it is recycled. To make, you know, to evaluate, you know, the number of, for example, kilos that are, you know, thrown, and the ones that are thrown not properly, and how we would like, you know, this to be changed. So students will be much more converted into project dealers. They will know, you know, what is the time that they got to sort this out. They will know, you know, the way it has to be done, because they are going to discuss in group. And this is very important. We will mention that after. And by the end, you know, the resources that they are going to require. And they can also ask the rest of the society, their parents, the town hall, or any company that is, you know, in their location, to help them to achieve these goals. And coming back, you know, to what I said, in group, nothing in history, in human history, had happened through a single person. And sometimes we give the name for a single person when that person was behind a big group of people, right? So we have to start working on cooperating each other. And it's, you know, like one of the latest trends from the last 5 years, and people are very focused on cooperation. Please don't forget collaboration, because in collaboration we also have mixability. The way of understanding or being tolerant, you know, to the different, you know, skills every single person have. But if students, and I can say exactly the same for teachers, if we don't know the weaknesses and the strengths of every single member of a team, we will be a group, not a team. So students have to have that type of cohesion, union, and when this is done is when students can grow more. So that's why, you know, I think it's important to have stable groups, you know, especially in primary education, and to make, you know, cross-curricular, as many as possible, cross-curricular, you know, projects. Through phenomenon-based learning, you can learn a lot. Look at, you know, we were talking about the rubbish problem. Then we've got biology. Then we've got, you know, social studies. Then we got English, because English is totally merged everywhere. So we can mix that as many, you know, contents as we want, and no matter if they come from one thing that we call subject, and it comes from this subject or that one, right? But I think it requires a little bit, you know, of training, or let's say experience in the previous step, which is, you know, project-based learning.
Okay. We have been talking about the advantages of C.L.I.L. Okay, you are a practitioner, you are a teacher trainer, the members of our audience are teachers. What are the main obstacles? And from 3 different points of view, the teachers, centers, and parents. A really important topic there.
Well, let's go one by one. I hope I will be able to answer all that. You know, I think, you know, let's say obstacles, you know, because I don't find problems. Problems can create, you know, like bad smooth or something like that, you know, by the end, you know, we've got obstacles, something that we know, yes, especially as teachers, you know, that we have to jump over and go forth, right? I think, you know, most of the problem, you know, that we got as teachers can be, you know, linguistic level, can be, you know, training, and can be knowledge of the content. Because here in Spain, you know, most of the teachers came from being English teachers into natural science teachers. So probably they don't know, or they don't have a lot of, you know, knowledge about the specific content of natural science. So we have to evaluate ourselves and to see, you know, what are our difficulties and where for them, you know. So if I'm not an expert in natural science, or for example, I don't know, I can talk about, you know, animals, and I can talk about the human body, but I don't see, you know, I don't see myself, you know, teaching, for example, energy and machines. I have to try to find someone who can help me. For that reason, there are a lot of resources. Of course, there are a lot of resources, and publishing companies have to help us, you know, in order to reach that resources, right? But I think it's one of the biggest difficulties, you know, and it's because, you know, most of the communities were running, you know, pretty fast in order to have, you know, bilingual schools, and this is not, you know, like a fashion that will die. No, it's a necessity, you know, because we are in the European Commission and we need to communicate with the rest of the world. Right, so it's from my point of view, there is no obstacle thinking that bilingual education is now and it won't be, you know, in the future. It's a must. I mean, especially if you have experienced that most of the teachers who are able to understand what we are saying here are English speakers in different levels, but English speakers. They will be able to see what benefits they've got of speaking English, especially English.
Then why is so controversial sometimes?
I mean, it's controversial because of the organization sometimes of schools, and the schools are, you know, like a domino. from what different autonomous communities are dealing with the bilingual education, right? I think it's a big difficulty, a big issue to work in school, especially in the ones that I've seen in Andalusia, to be bilingual for a year and lose this name, or let's say surname, next year because you don't have people enough. I think we have to invest. I think we have to, as teachers, try to do our best, in order to teach English, and especially one thing that I consider the must, and in every single school in which we are working or collaborating makes a big difference, is one face, one language. Once we understand as bilingual teachers that my language of reference has to be kept, and I have to go on teaching in that language, not changing into another language, the demand from kids will be much bigger. So students will be able to speak to us in English. Is the controversial here is when some parents or some schools are sending kids to England and they want them to be, because they want them to be living in a context, English context. This English context is what we have to create in every single session, right? And of course, some people can tell me, there are big difficulties to explain some stuff in English. It's not that there is a difficulty. We have to try to find a way. Because I can say, if someone could do it, why cannot we do it? So let's try to find a way. Because your body language, your knowledge of how they acquire, English as a second language, can help you a lot. And this comes into another, big issue. Native speakers or non-native speakers. And for me, native speakers are very good to give, quality. But you, non-native speakers, have the power of knowing how English is built in a Spaniard, right? It's not the same being an Italian speaker and learning English than being a Spaniard and learning English. So, the false friends, the some words can be tricky or not. How they understand, when I am saying some words, or what are the words that I have to choose. For example, when we are learning, natural science, and I usually try to find that closest to the Spanish, right? Latin words is all these, so the benefits of being a teacher who has learned, English as a second language, and having, these type of students just in front of you for a longer period of time, because they are going to be learning, several subjects in English. It's the benefits are enormous, and I think, we have to try to find a way. And of course, if you see this difficult, visit other schools, visit your mates, your co-workers at school. And this is something that we usually do in our schools. We assign, teachers to visit each other.
Observation that here in Spain is not so much in haste, let's say.
It's easier to be, or probably you can feel, more comfortable, to be in your classroom on your own, doing your own activities. But once you share, and sharing is caring in this case, you are able to learn from the others and the others from you. So the atmosphere that you create in the group of teachers is much more open-minded, open to listen, to the, let's say, evaluation from others. Once you are open to that, you are able to admit that there are things that can be improved, is when, the change from group into a team happen.
Okay, so, well, thank you very much. We have a couple of questions from the audience. Okay, Carmen was asking, what is the role of the evaluation from the point of view of the difficulties related to the non-well certified teachers to teach bilingual classes?
Wow.
Wow.
What a long question.
I think I said everything, Carmen.
Okay, is non-certified teachers?
Non-well certified teachers to teach bilingual classes.
Right, the first thing is that, I don't care about certificates. I think what is important is to feel, strong enough to be in front of a classroom, right? Training is the first thing we have to try to find. And secondly, the knowledge of the content that you are teaching. Of course, evaluation is really important. Evaluation depends on the way you teach. If you teach in 2-3 weeks, evaluation is very limited. If you extend the learning exposure into, for example, we were talking, project-based learning, evaluation will happen every single moment, much more continuous. And by the end, you can have a formal one. But it won't be, as difficult to be created as if you are working in only 2-3 sessions. So, as well as the students are working through the language scaffolding and cognitive levels, you will be able to evaluate the different steps in which they are, right? So I think evaluation is this by now, and especially, in CLIL. So what I am demanding, if you allow me, to demand, today here in this class, is that we have to start working in long periods of time. I can tell you, that people who work through projects can get much more from the students, and you don't leave so many students behind, which I think it wasn't the goal. When I started working in bilingual education, I said, well, they will get it later. But it's very beautiful to see that the students who can give, a lot in 2 weeks can learn not only the contents that were assigned by the curriculum, but the language that is assigned by the curriculum, but they are able to help the others. They are able to cooperate. They are able to learn, to extend, knowledge towards their own direction, to give, much more personal education. So the environment in the classroom is totally different. And this way, I think, evaluation is a process of observation of your students. And this demands, also a different perception or a different role of the teacher. I think teacher has to change from, the master, the person who mastered the knowledge, into the person who facilitates the information to kids. If we consider ourselves as guides, students will see that we are with them. And especially if we as teachers also demonstrate that we can commit errors. We are not perfect. Internet is there. Internet can give much more information than we've got. We have to help the students for the future. And the future is to help them filter the information that is in internet, to use it properly, and to build their own, individually, to build, their own learning processes.
Okay. One last question, just kind of summary what you were saying, especially at the beginning, like talking about different subjects. Is it possible to apply CLIL activities into ESL or EFL classroom?
I mean, let's say ELT.
Yep.
If I say ELT has died in a bilingual school. Because if we want to apply CLIL, it means integration. If I integrate, English to with the rest of the subjects, ELT die, and now it's CLIL. So I have to look at what the students are learning in other subjects to help them build the linguistic, the linguistic levels, the linguistic needs that they require in order to explain what they are learning in the other subjects. So I see that in primary education is much easier because there are different activities that you can apply in the proper moment of introduction of content and using the content and applying the content. But in secondary education is much more difficult because of the profile of teachers and the organization. But I see English in secondary education as the teacher of English has to be a helper for the non-linguistic subjects. So this person, not only because of the knowledge of the language or how to learn a language or how to teach a language, they can help, the non-linguistic teachers, but also, they must help the students to get the most from these subjects.
Okay, so thank you very much, Willy. It's always a pleasure to have you here. I'm sure you will come back again for another session. So thanks everybody for joining us in this session. Hopefully you will find it useful and you will have more clear idea of the past, the present, and the future of CLIL. Thanks.
Cheers.